Stoic Odyssey. For over 2 millennia, Homer's Odyssey has been read as a sweeping tale of adventure, monsters, and magic. Yet, if we strip away the gods and the mythology, what remains is arguably the greatest psychological thriller ever written. Beneath the poetic meter lies a meticulously crafted manual for the human mind. Long before Zeno founded Stoicism, Homer was articulating its deepest truths. Odysseus, the man of many turns, is not just a warrior. He is the archetypal Stoic practitioner. His 10-year struggle to return to Ithaca is a perfect metaphor for our own daily struggle to return to our center, our purpose, and our rational minds amidst the chaos of the external world. If we read the epic not as a geography of islands, but as a topology of the human soul, every monster and storm becomes a manifestation of our internal vices and external challenges. Early in his journey, Odysseus is warned about the sirens, creatures whose enchanting singing lures sailors to their deaths upon jagged rocks. Odysseus knows human nature. He knows that once he hears the song, his rational mind will evaporate. Therefore, he does not attempt to resist through sheer willpower. He commands his crew to plug their ears with beeswax and tie him tightly to the ship's mast, instructing them to ignore his future screams. This episode is a flawless illustration of the Stoic dichotomy of control. We are constantly told to resist temptation, but the Stoics recognized that willpower is a depletable resource. If you place yourself in the path of the sirens, whether that is doom-scrolling, keeping junk food in the pantry, or engaging with toxic people, you will eventually crash. The Stoic solution is environmental design. You must tie yourself to the mast of your principles before the storm hits. You build systems and boundaries that restrict your future, irrational self. You do not test your virtue against impossible odds. You architect your life so that virtue becomes the path of least resistance. Avoiding the active pull of temptation is only half the battle. One must also resist the passive trap of complacency. After surviving the horrors of Troy, Odysseus washes ashore on Aegea. Here, the nymph Calypso offers him a deal most mortals would consider paradise: immortality and unbroken ease. Yet, Homer tells us Odysseus refuses, spending his days sitting on the rocky shore weeping. He chooses a brutal, potentially fatal journey over eternal comfort. Why? Because accepting Calypso's offer requires abandoning his identity as a man of action. This perfectly encapsulates Seneca's fierce warnings against the dangers of unbroken leisure. He argued that a life dedicated solely to pleasure and devoid of struggle is not a life at all, but a slow, suffocating death of the soul. Calypso's island is the ultimate comfort zone. We are seduced by the illusion that the absence of pain equals the presence of joy. The Stoics understood that human beings are built for excellence and overcoming friction. Pleasure is only sweet when it is a brief rest on a meaningful journey. When it becomes the destination, it turns into a golden cage. Perhaps the most terrifying passage in the epic is the Strait of Scylla and Charybdis. Charybdis is a massive whirlpool that will swallow the entire ship. Scylla is a 6-headed monster who will eat exactly 6 men. There is no third route. There is no clever trick. Odysseus must choose how many lives to sacrifice to save the rest. He chooses Scylla, sailing close enough to watch 6 of his friends torn from the deck while he does nothing to save them. It is a horrifying decision, but the only rational one. This is the Stoic crucible, the practice of amor fati, or love of fate. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about facing the brutal, unfair parameters of reality without flinching. The universe does not care about your moral comfort. Sometimes, you will be forced to choose the lesser of 2 evils. The unstoic mind paralyzes itself searching for a magical, pain-free solution. The Stoic mind accepts the tragic math of reality, mourns the inevitable loss, and keeps the ship sailing forward. Before facing such agonizing choices, however, there is a far more insidious threat that threatens to end the journey before it begins. The desire to simply stop checking out. Before facing the Cyclops, Odysseus lands on an island of the Lotus Eaters. The locals offer his men a sweet flower to eat. This is not a poison that kills the body, it annihilates the will. The lotus is Homer's prophetic vision of modern escapism. Epictetus taught that our primary duty is to zealously guard the gates of our minds. The modern lotus is the 4 hours lost to algorithms, the news cycle that angers you but changes nothing, the reliance on substances to anesthetize the quiet ache of unfulfilled potential. We eat the lotus because facing reality is exhausting. It offers a shortcut to feeling good. But the Stoics knew that trading your agency for temporary comfort is the ultimate tragedy. Numbness is not peace. Identify your personal lotus, refuse the flower, and embrace the pain of being awake. To escape, he ties his men under the bellies of the sheep. It is a flawless execution of survival strategy. They reach the ships. They are safe. But then, Odysseus's ego overrides his reason. As they row away, he stands up and screams back at the blinded monster, making the fatal, arrogant mistake of revealing his true name. The monster calls upon his father, Poseidon, who curses Odysseus, ensuring he will lose his crew and spend another decade lost at sea. The Stoics viewed uncontrolled pride as a profound weakness. Epictetus reminded his students that it is not the actions of others that harm us, but our own inflated opinions of ourselves. Odysseus won the battle, but lost the war because he needed his enemy to know who he was. This catastrophic lapse in ego control serves as the ultimate cautionary tale for the final phase of his journey, explaining why, upon reaching Ithaca, Odysseus masters the opposite extreme, invisibility. When Odysseus finally arrives back after 20 years, his palace has been overrun by over 100 arrogant suitors eating his food and disrespecting his name. Guided by Athena, Odysseus disguises himself as a decrepit beggar. He walks into his own dining room and watches these men destroy his legacy. They throw food at him, they insult him, they strike him with a stool, and Odysseus does absolutely nothing. He stands there, absorbing the abuse, observing their habits, and waiting for the precise moment to strike. When it arrives, he strings his bow and executes them with ruthless efficiency. This is the absolute zenith of Stoic emotional discipline. Stoicism teaches that no one can insult you unless you grant them the power to do so. To the disguised Odysseus, these men were ignorant fools whose opinions held zero weight. Reacting emotionally surrenders your strategic advantage. This legendary patience stands in stark contrast to an earlier failure of his crew, highlighting the critical difference between reactive impatience and strategic endurance. One of the most agonizing setbacks in the epic occurs not due to a monster, but due to his crew's impatience. The wind god Aeolus captures all the violent opposing winds in a massive leather bag, leaving only the gentle west wind to blow Odysseus smoothly home. For days they sail flawlessly. Finally, Ithaca appears on the horizon. Exhausted, Odysseus falls asleep. His crew, convinced the bag holds gold and silver that Odysseus is hoarding, open it. The hurricane of trapped winds explodes out, blowing them all the way back to the start. This episode is a profound metaphor for the Stoic virtue of trusting the process. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about acting rightly without demanding immediate, visible results. The crew represents our anxious, greedy minds. We start a new venture, and if we do not see massive success in a few weeks, we pivot. We open the bag of winds because we lack faith in the quiet, invisible work of compounding effort. True success requires trusting the sealed bag. Do the work, maintain your discipline, and let the winds carry you in their own time. Even when one masters patience and trusts the universe, The physical and emotional toll of the voyage cannot be ignored. Stripping away the false idea that Stoicism is toxic positivity. A pervasive misconception is that Stoicism is synonymous with suppressing emotions, that a Stoic is an unfeeling robot who smiles through tragedy. Homer shatters this myth completely. After 7 years trapped on Calypso's island, Odysseus is finally allowed to leave, only to be hit by a storm. His raft is shattered. He is tossed into the violent sea, clinging to a broken plank. When he finally washes ashore, naked and covered in salt, Homer explicitly states that Odysseus sat there, weeping like a lion whose cubs have been stolen. He cries for his lost crew and his endless agony. This aligns perfectly with the nuanced psychology of Seneca. Seneca explicitly stated that the Stoic sage will feel the initial strike of grief. He is, after all, human. The Stoic concept of first movements acknowledges that our initial involuntary reactions are natural and unavoidable. You are allowed to weep on the beach. The Stoic difference lies entirely in the second movement of the mind. You can cry, but you cannot consent to the despair. After his tears, Odysseus stands up, dresses, and walks into the city ready to face the next challenge. Feel the blow, but do not let it alter your course. To survive this grief without succumbing to despair requires a shift in perception, illustrated through the constant presence of Athena's disguises. Throughout the epic, the goddess rarely appears to mortals in her true divine form. Instead, she operates through disguise, appearing as a trusted friend or a shepherd boy. When she first meets Odysseus on Ithaca, she is disguised as a young man. She does this not to deceive him maliciously, but to test his character and his ability to perceive the truth beneath a rough exterior. This is a brilliant narrative representation of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on Perception. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. The Stoics taught that the universe is inherently rational, but our initial perception of events is almost always flawed by fear or ego. When a disaster arrives in your life, a lost job, a harsh critique, a sudden illness, it is Athena in disguise. What lesson is this forcing me to learn? Train yourself to look past the ugly disguise of hardship, to find the hidden architecture of growth beneath it. Ultimately, surviving grief and mastering ego leads to a profound realization about the nature of the journey itself, culminating in Ithaca's true meaning. If there is one supreme lesson to be drawn from the entirety of the epic, it is that the destination is an illusion. For 10 years, Odysseus's singular, obsessive goal is to reach Ithaca. He sacrifices his men, his youth, and his peace to achieve it. Yet when he finally reclaims his throne, the narrative ends almost abruptly. There is no eternal happily ever after. To read the Odyssey as a Stoic text is to realize that Ithaca is not a physical place in the Mediterranean. It is a state of psychological wholeness. It is the return to the rational self, the self that is in complete alignment with nature and its own inherent purpose. Troy represents our past mistakes, our wars, our entanglements in external affairs. The sea is the chaotic present moment, filled with illusions. Odysseus is not a god. He is a mortal man prone to error, as seen with the Cyclops. His triumph lies in refusing to surrender his agency. He is tied to the mast. He sits in the ashes of his own palace. He weeps on desolate beaches, but he never stops moving forward. The Stoic philosophy does not offer us a life free of storms. It offers us the exact coordinates on how to sail through them without breaking. In the end, the monsters will always be there. The sirens will never stop singing. The winds will always be shifting. But if you learn to guard your mind like Odysseus guarded his ship, you will find that the power to reach Ithaca has been inside you all along.